Welcome to the Cross Country ComX Show, CCCX. I'm Sizzle, the ComX dude, and we're here with Dustin, the other host, and Lee Chalker. And our guest today to start the show off is Daniel Best.
Hello, Dan.
Hello.
So into it, Lee.
The
Right,
best there is, right?
Yeah. All right. So, Daniel, you have, I guess, mate, from what I've heard about you, because the first time I've met you is you're a bit of an Australian comic books historian. You've written plenty of articles and books on varying eras of Australian, comics, artists, creators, etc., etc. Good morning, Gary.
Yes.
Mate, I guess probably the first thing I'd like to ask you is, mate, what drew you into it? Were you like always a comic book fan? Like you wanted to be a writer, but sort of veered off into, journalism type stuff? What got you on the path, mate?
Always a comic book fan. I mean, I can even remember the first comic book that was bought for me. It was the Spider-Man drug issues, way back when. That's how old I am. So I grew up with them like any kid of the 70s and the 80s did, buying mainly not really buying, shoplifting Newton and Federal, Murray comics and all those reprint stuff. But never thought about writing about it, although I had read some of the books, like All in Colour for a Dime, these American books that would come out, Little Fighter, but never thought much about the Australian side of things, much to my detriment. Although I did read them, the Gerald Carr, vampire books, that kind of thing. So, long story short, obviously, went into journalism, worked for the ABC for a while, and that sort of fostered my love, I suppose, and brought out this latent ability I've got to be able to write non-fiction and write articles and research and do things like that. I found that when I was writing fiction, that was mainly in my teenage years and early adult years, it was pretty crap. I would find someone else's story and think, I can write this and I can write it better, so I just rewrite these stories, which isn't a bad thing to do, but quite problematic to get anyone to read it when you're rewriting Ken Casey and that kind of the gonzo journalist things. Yeah, it doesn't work. So went into writing about music first off, and that was primarily because that was what was paying. Nobody would pay for anything but movies and music, so I wrote about movies and music all through the 90s. And in the early 2000s, the magazine I was writing for went broke, owing me a considerable sum of money. So sitting there doing nothing, thought, well, I'm not going to get paid for this. I want to do something I want to do, and just started interviewing American comic book artists. And then from then, I got read a lot of stories and started writing about American comic books. And after having my first book published, which was about Ross Andrew and Mike Esposito, and being ripped off on that one as well, I've never been paid for it. Went into, I sort of stuck with that for a while, and then I got tired of being attacked and abused. American comic book fans are a weird group of people. No offense to you, Dustin. They really, I mean, put it this way, if you say, wow, Stan Lee did some good stuff. Oh, you hate Jack Kirby, you're a side. And if you go, no, Jack Kirby isn't a bad artist. Oh, you hate Stan Lee. Oh, God, you can't be a around. And I was writing all this legal stuff about the Jack Kirby versus Marvel case and the Superman case. And I published a couple of books on the Superman case. And I was just doing bits and pieces. This is just nuts. See, these people are crazy. So I went to write about movies again, horror movies. And I was getting published and I was getting nominated for awards. And then of all people, Gary Challoner drew me back in because he said, you should be writing about Australian comics and I need you to write for the Ledger Awards. I went, well, why don't you get Kevin Patrick? No, he's already said no. Oh, why don't you get Matt Emery? No, he said no as well. So, you're basically about fifth on the list. So You're the only one that'll say yes. And I went, okay, does it pay? No. Well, I'm used to that. What the hell? And then I just went for me and realised that I have all this knowledge of Australian stuff in my head, as well as the American stuff. So why not just start writing about it? And found that the more I looked back into the past and started really getting that knowledge together, started researching, there's really some great stories and some great artists and writers that we had. Keith Chato and who I've put a book out about, the reprint stuff, the Grey Downs, the Yaffers, the Max Newtons, and all the people that were here. And it just sort of flowed from there. And the more I got into it, the more people were telling me their story. And I'm great to hear anyone's story about what they've done. I'm really big on getting people's stories down. So, you've worked in comic books and people will generally sit there and go, no, well, I only started at about 99, so I haven't been doing it that long. No, you've been doing it for like 22, 23 years. And you probably did it at school. Yeah, so you've been doing it for 30 years now. So let's talk about that. And I get these amazing stories come through. And I realised that the Australian scene is a lot more vibrant than the American. No offence, Dustin. Is a lot more vibrant than the American scene.
Let me intercede on that particular comment. So it's the thing is with what you see though in the Australian industry is you guys are like this bubble. Okay, you're a bubble. You've got a couple big dudes like Mike Crome and whatnot that have moved out into the industry and work all over the world and stuff like that. But for the most part, you're an untapped resource in the comic industry. Okay, so there's no part of you being proud of your comic heritage that's something that should be a diss or a knock or anything else at whatever's going around in the world. But there's a concept when you see comic books from the U.S., most people that see them, they only see your Marvel, they see your DC. Most of the time, those books are because they've been reprinted in other countries, so that you guys could get them all over the world. I mean, it's not just the UK or anything like that. It's India. It's, whoever else is, picking up books at a time. You know what I mean? And I mean, Mexico had their own variants for the longest time. They would have their own, Spider-Man covers and stuff that people collect nowadays because they don't print books like that anymore. They tend to everybody tends to get the U.S. copies now versus what they were getting previously when the books were printed in their country. So it's a very interesting topic to go, hey, look, this is what the U.S. puts out because you get to see the generic books. You don't get to see what you like in Australia. You guys get to see the nitty gritty of the Australian production companies and what's going on over there and who's putting out what and da. But over here, it's a much larger ball field when it comes to comic book artists and production companies and stuff like that. So there's probably 150, 200 game players in the US versus the 50 in the Australia. You know what I mean? It's a very different type of vibe. But it's very interesting when people come on and they talk about the histories because people don't think about like the Shadow. They don't think about, oh my gosh, what's the dude's name, Lee, that I'm thinking of? The guy in the purple pajamas.
The Phantom.
You know what I mean? There's all these really cool books that come from places and we don't even realize they come from places because they're reprinted in the US at a much larger rate than they were printed originally. So there's cool history, man. There's real cool history and I'm down for it. So I'm never taking offense, man, because I learn more every day. You know what I mean? And our viewers in the U.S. are learning more every day, just like we hope to bring to you guys so you can see certain things. Like I'm going to do everything in my power to get the listener in Australia in a big way. You know what I mean? So, but it's interesting. It's very interesting to me. So, yeah, let's go, man. I'm excited. Tell us all the stories. Tell us all the differences. And we're down to, imbibe all your knowledge, my friend.
Oh my God, the stories. Oh, there's a few stories I can't tell because people are still alive. And as I think we said in the green room, I know really scurrilous story that I could tell, but I'd get a really angry phone call about 5 seconds later. Right. There's been some incredibly colourful characters in the Australian comic book industry, and this goes way, way back. Publishers, writers, artists, you name it, that they've all been around, and some of them have been no more colourful than what's been in anywhere else in the world. I read stuff about some of the UK guys, and my God, they're nuts. You know how UK guys that they'd go in and they'd work, start on a Monday, and then on Friday they're straight down to the pub and they'd have benders all weekend, and then on the Monday, oh geez, I can't. Oh God! Well, you've been drunk for 48 hours.
Right. How do you think they come up with some of that stuff? I mean, come on.
Would have been awesome though to be in a conversation with them at the pub by Sunday afternoon, man, thinking about the next issue of 2000 AD.
That's great.
If I could have gotten if I could have been a fly on the wall in the restaurant where Eastman and Laird were came up with turtles on a napkin. You know what I mean? And there's plenty of stories about those guys and their own, what they would imbibe and whatnot, but at the same time, how cool would it be just to see these guys that created this industry, and what they've done and how they did it. I mean, I'd ate a shitty ass burger to sit with those guys. You know what I mean? It wouldn't even been a thing.
One of my favorite ones, and this is an American one, if I was going to be a fly on the wall, it would have been, and you'll have to bear with me on this one, when Marlon Brando farted on Ross Andrew, the comic book artist, the Spider-Man artist. And the story was that Mike Esposito and Ross had a studio, and it was off Broadway, so it was like one block around from Broadway, which I imagine is the next street over here for Australia. And Ross was seeing this woman who Marlon Brando was seeing. So Marlon Brando, this is like the late 1940s, early 1950s, or somewhere around that period. It was when Marlon Brando was on stage. And Mike says, so Marlon would come round and he'd hang out at the studio and just sit there. And so one day he came up and Ross was in his chair, and the woman came in and came over and kissed Ross on the cheek. So Mike says Marlon stood up from his thing, walked over to Ross, pointed his buttocks in his face, and then walked out. Ross would never ever see a Marlon Brando movie after that, and Mike dragged him to see the Godfather. As soon as Marlon came up, he got up and left.
Shit on me and get away with it.
Farted in his face. And I said, well, what happened to the woman? Oh, she ended up running off with Marlon Brando at some point. Oh, of course she did.
Oh, Marlon, hey? Get a load of that into you. Bloody hell.
The Australian
I don't know what I'd do about that. You know what I mean? Like if you were in a restaurant, it would probably be a little bit, yeah. I've just been flatulated on by Marlon Brando. I don't know, man. Like, I reckon I'd get a T-shirt made out of that, eh?
I said to Mike, I said, I actually said that. I said I would have had a shirt made up somewhere in the 80s saying, I've been farted on by a multiple Oscar winner. The greatest American actor of the 20th century dropped his guts on this head.
Yeah. And Ross could have sold fake bottles of it and said, Marlon flatulence for sale with a comic book and stuff. You could have, if he had Kickstarter back in the day, that could have been an add-on, mate.
Man, so we did soap, right? We did soap a couple books back, and that'd have been mad funny. You got your Brando soap all ready to go? You gonna smell like Brando ass?
Smell like Brando. Oh man, go to dinner, eh? Oh, hang on a minute, I forgot my smell like Brando.
Imagine going to dinner and all of a sudden Marlon walks over to you. Oh, hello, Marlon. Oh, Marlon.
Part your bloody hair.
Again, haven't you?
Wait for that Brando.
Yeah,
The
yes.
Australian scene, some of the people in the Australian scene were probably just as nuts. I mean, I've heard stories about certain people that like to prance around their house naked in front of anyone and everyone.
Jesus,
Sorry?
I thought everybody did that. Damn.
Not everyone, thankfully, no. Every time I've caught up with people, they've thankfully been clothed. I'm very, very thankfully been clothed. But I mean, you had Max Newton, who was the publisher of Newton Comics, and he was a drunk. He was a drug addict. He sold porn. He did all these things, and he had his own newspaper, obviously, his own printing presses. And a great story of him coming in one Sunday morning, late Saturday night, when the Sunday papers were being printed, his own newspaper, completely off his head, walked up a ladder and went above a catwalk where the printing presses were, ripped it out, and slashed all over the newspaper that was being printed, coming on its printing presses. Did his thing, had a shake, put it away, went down and walked out, and all the people would sit there going, "What the hell was that?" Max just pissed on his own newspaper. But Max was a great character. He got locked, well, not locked. He got locked up for his drink and drugs, and he got put into a secure facility for psychiatric thing. He broke out. He was found 3 days later in the Hilton Hotel in Melbourne. Now, when he broke out, he was completely naked and had no identification on him. And yet he managed to get to the Hilton Hotel in Melbourne, stark naked, check in, get a room, and get drunk again.
That's impressive.
And that was like 1978. Go figure out how you do that. I mean, I thought that he must have been a magician.
It was a special talent to be able to do that.
Well, I find it hard to walk from the bathroom to the bathroom floor naked, let alone walk all the way through Melbourne, go to the hotel and check.
He was probably there every day, mate. People probably were just so used to him.
That's just Max. He's nuts hanging out again.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, there's been some really good stories with the Australian scene, both behind the scenes and the stories that they put out as well. The Australian, and this is something, Dustin, I mean, I used to get all of these really unusual sort of ashcan type things, the little A5 stuff from Steve Bissett, and they were brilliant. And I realized that we do the same here. But the Australian ones, we've got such a completely unique voice that we use.
Yeah.
And the artists and the writers use this voice so well. Whereas, I mean, certainly American superhero comics are somewhat of a generic product.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, I look at how some of them are written. I think you've not got a new idea. You're just rehashing everything that's come along. Whereas if Australians jump on something, they go, I don't want to write Batman. I want to write something else. And they just come up with these. I mean, Detective Budgie, what a great character. Who comes up with a budgerigar that's Bruce Willis crossed with Humphrey Bogart?
Right.
Cleary did.
Cleary.
Absolutely.
Who else comes up with that?
I think that's the cool stuff. But I think that's the misnomer with the industry. I think that you guys, what you guys get to see is Marvel and DC and Image. Image has done well for itself. You guys also got to see Dark Horse. I think you guys got Dark Horse.
Yeah, we get Dark Horse.
So you guys would get Dark Horse, and those were like the big 4 or 5 that you guys were getting. Those were the primary comics that you guys were getting. And I think that going back, if you look now at the scene, the scene now, you know what I mean? It's a very different dynamic than it was before. Because with the fact that Marvel and DC no longer order through Diamond Comics, which is the biggest distributor in our country, you know what I mean? Now that you don't order through them anymore, people are starting to see more and more of the indie the indie wave, or what have you, because in the 90s we had this huge boom of indie comics. It was a huge boom of indie comics, and I think we're seeing that bubble again, but in a different format. As when in the 90s we had Jim Lee and we had all these guys that were literally, and Todd McFarlane and whatnot, that were pushing the indie scene. But at the same time, the only indie books worth of shit were a couple different publishers, and the boom was coming. The bubble was about to burst, and you would only keep a certain few of those indie publishers, And when we got into the 2000s, we ended up getting IDW. We got Black Hammer. We got a couple different publishers that stuck around through it all. Antarctic Press, a couple of those guys. But now, as we get into we went into the pandemic, more and more people are realizing that, man, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write this. I'm going to do this. And all of a sudden, you're starting to see these indie creators, not indie publishers. You were seeing indie creators. And now we're starting to see more indie publishers. It's become with Kickstarter and with crowdfunding and whatever else. You're seeing the big dogs out here that are also crowdfunding, though. It's not just your indie guys. Your big companies are out here doing it too. So I think what we're seeing now is the ability to pick up other forms of books. Like right now, I'm upset because I can't ship to y'all. You know what I mean? I'm not going to pay the $65 to ship a single issue. I'm just not going to do it. It sucks. You know what I mean? And that tariff was put on us like 8 months ago, and it's still driving people nuts. You know what I mean? So, but if people look and they go forward, now the digital age makes it that much easier for you guys to get our books and to read our stuff outside of those top 3 companies. Now you guys are able to see what we're putting out, versus in Australia, you guys are putting out all these great indie titles, but that's what you're putting out. You know what I mean? You're putting out these great indie titles, and people are starting to get to see those great indie titles because I said it earlier, it's an untapped resource in the comic community. It really is, because it's just like Hawaii, and Hawaii's trying to, even though it's part of the U.S., it's still an island way out. You know what I mean? So you're starting to see these guys go, hey, look, I need to market in the continental U.S. versus over here. You know what I mean? And we're getting to see those type of books, like the Mana guys and stuff. They're putting their books out, and they're great. So yeah, it's interesting to see now that you guys are getting to see more of our books and more of our stories that are more akin to yours than you're getting your Marvel and your DC and stuff like that. Because as far as I know, Marvel and DC are having trouble even distributing anywhere right now. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, Marvel, DC, Image, and all of that. Now, in Australia, we had companies back in the 40s and through to the 50s, even in the 30s. You had the Yaffa Syndicate, you had KG Murray, Ken Murray, all of that, and they were producing comic books. And that all stopped in the early 60s, which is why I always say that Australia never had a silver age, because comics only then came back in. Australian manufactured, written, drawn, produced comics only came back in when Gerald Carr started up in the early 70s. Now, we never had, and never really have had, one publisher or 2 publishers, for that example. We've never had a Marvel, a DC, or an Image Comics, because it's funny, as our population is growing, it seems that either less people are reading them, or it's the same amount of people that read them back in the day, but there's more people out there, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And literally everything that comes out in Australia from about 1970 onwards has been in indie press.
Yeah.
When it has Australian content, because this country can't sustain, for whatever reason, and I've got my theories, we can't sustain 1 or 2 main companies that would hire, everyone and do a Marvel and a DC. Part of that is because of the American scene. We had Marvel made no secrets, and DC didn't either, about swamping us to death in the 70s and 80s. Certainly in the 80s and 90s, Marvel made a point of, they even stood up at one of the conventions in Sydney and said, we are going to swamp the market here. We're putting out our own, Australian priced Marvel comics. We're just going to blitz you little guys out of business, because we want this money.
Right.
And that lasted for a couple of years, and then it died because it just can't sustain. So everything you get here is independent.
Right.
And I think that's brilliant. And as for the pandemic, I mean, I've loved this pandemic in the way that I don't ever have to leave the house now.
Right.
Which is great for someone like me, because I hate leaving the house. I have to be dragged out. Yeah, come on, we're going to go. Oh, I don't want to go.
I think the pandemic is
COVID.
Yeah. I think the pandemic is also allowed, and modern technology as well. Like, because those like Gerald Carr and the guys from Cyclone and that, like, I mean, they were trailblazers for that period. As you said, like, there was a real low during that 60s, and then these guys in the 70s and like early 80s, like came out of nowhere and stuck to their guns and had a story to tell, and they wanted to get it out there and that. I think the pandemic has provided people time. I think it's also provided people to get confidence with their voice. They may not have a view that they want to get out there publicly and speak politically, or their voice on, either side of what they believe in, like all of the turbulence at the moment. But I think it's allowed people to start reading, going back through these things, going back to childhood dreams or aspirations of, I've had this idea, I want to put it out there. I think the independent way, I mean, there's really no walls except yourself, that you have to jump over, is there? Once you get through that self-confidence to tell your story, then, like, you can get it out there. I mean, there's people like Shane that are willing to give people a go. Kickstarter has allowed people to, like, get, that don't have the money to, like, fund their stuff initially, but it's given them the boost that they need. So there's more and more people that aren't sitting in a lounge room or in a granny flat, or, in a bottle of fear as to what they've got to say. They're getting it out there because their other peers and people are doing that. I've read comic books since I was a small boy. My dad collected Spider-Man, Marvel, all those things in the 60s when they were 10 cents and 5 cents, and he used to get them from the Gunda guy, sub news agents, which was the post office, news agents, corner store, dentist, doctor, like all of these things in one shop. And, now I look at it, and I also think Australia's got a unique thing too, because we're a big country with a relatively small population. So a lot of the creators that are coming, like for me, I'm in far north Queensland. There's creators in Perth. There's creators in Melbourne. There's creators in South Australia. And all of these areas have their own unique identity. And I think they help shape the individual creators as well, So
yep.
I would think that right currently now, Daniel, I think independent comics are by far the most interesting. I mean, I read, and I bring it up again, I had, I've still got a 250 issue run, not as many as some, but more than others, of the Uncanny X-Men that I read from the early 80s to the end of the 90s. And I got to the point where I was like, man, I've read this story arc like 6 years ago. I've read this story arc like 10 years ago, and I just stopped, I just thought, like, man, I'm not spending money on something I've read like multiple times. It's, I guess, you get drowned out in it, don't you? It's oversaturation of the same crap. So that's why I like the independent side. It's like people have a voice, they have a story, and they get it out there and they do it. And it's self-help, really, isn't it? If you're not going to, they do it themselves. So there's a sense of far more satisfaction, I think, than than getting to get the product out there, as opposed to getting pats on the backs from the bloke in the cubicle next to you that's like drawing the next thing.
Well, I mean, that's still going on, right? I mean, that really is still going on. Like right now, we had a conversation. I have guys that work, and girls on our teams that work with Marvel and DC still to this day. You know what I mean? So it's like when we put out a book, I go panel by panel. Everything has to be different. Everything has to be right on each panel, right? And I wear a lot of hats, And when I look at it, I had a guy come to me the other day, and he was like, "Hey, Dustin, I'm going to buy a copy of every book you guys have ever put out." And I was like, okay, cool. You know, can I ask why? What's jumped this interest in our product? You know, and he was like, well, I'm going to show you something. And he sent me this cover. And I won't say who did the cover. They're a junior. That's all I'm going to say about that. And it's a Spider-Man book that just came out, and the cover is absolutely atrocious. And he sent me an image of one of our covers versus their cover. And I was like, yeah, okay, you know, I get that. You know, people are hit or miss. Then he started showing me other covers next to our covers, and I was like, okay, well, maybe they miss a little bit more than we miss. You know what I mean? But at the same time, he goes, well, I'm going to show you some interiors. So he sent me these new X-Men panels, right? And I'm like, okay, well, nah. And then he shows me this one, and he's like, that's the same panel twice on the same page. It's just zoomed in. And I looked at it, and I was like, what the fuck? I mean, if we can put out books at the rate that we're putting out books, and because like right now, Daniel, I put out a book every 6 weeks. Okay, so it's like I have 5 IPs right now. I'll have 8 by the end of the year. You know what I mean? And it's like, when you see these cats and they're putting out product, and you're like, why do people keep going back to this and running back to this? It's the exact same thing that, you know, we were just talking about. It's like, I'm sick of seeing the same old stories, but not just the same old stories. Now you're phoning in the work. You know what I mean? You're putting out half-assed product, and people are so used to eating that shit up that that's their norm. You know what I mean? It's no longer, oh my God, I just picked this up and the art's beautiful. Oh, that's acceptable. I accept this. Thank you for allowing me to purchase this from you. I accept this. And it's like, you know, the indie world is where it's at, man. We're going to make a big scene. You know, I think going forward, you know, especially with like Coffin Comics coming out and making a big boom again, you know, and the fact that you've got Dark Horse was just bought, you know, by another company. You've got the fact that IDW just lost Transformers. They also just lost G.I. Joe. You know, there's a lot of motion going on right now and I hate to use the US as such an example, but the US to me is the hub for comic books. You know what I mean? Outside of the US is where things are starting to get bigger, you know, and they're starting to bloom. But this is where your main companies are and your names and stuff like that. And you'll see outside of you know, you guys have got a bunch of cool folks. Same thing with like Japan right now. Japan's making moves as well in comic books because of manga. You know, manga is doing real big things for Japan. It has been for a long time, but the world is starting to pay more attention to that than they used to. So you're starting to see a lot of indie companies from all over the world do big things. Like myself personally, I'm trying to get with a good old Sizzly over there about doing some amazing stuff in Australia myself, you know, and in doing so, though, I want to give work to Australian artists and Australian writers. You know what I mean? That's my goal, is to be able to go, okay, cool. If we're going to work in another country, we want to make sure that we're employing the people that live in that country. You know what I mean? That's the goal, is to, you know, to continue building community like that.
And it's interesting you say. I mean, I this week on Tuesday did a seminar on writing superhero comics, and the one thing that I was stressing to everyone was, you know, be original, come up with an original idea, and the reason being is I mean, Lee, you mentioned this, the X-Men. It seems that, you know, okay, I'm going to write the X-Men. Well, I'm going to put them in the Savage Land. I'm going to have Magneto do something murderous. I'll have Jean Grey go woo, and, you know, I'll then put them in outer space, and I find out that all I'm doing is writing the same stories that Roy Thomas wrote with Neil Adams, and that seemed to be. And I remember thinking this once: those Roy Thomas, Neil Adams issues ended up being the template for the Claremont issues, and ended up being the template. And Claremont would just recycle it, and ended up being the template for everyone that comes forward. I've got a 10-issue X-Men story, and it's going to be based on that Roy Thomas, Neil Adams from the 1960s. Nothing is fresh.
Right.
Give me something original. And that's what I love about the Australian stuff. It is original. Even when so unlike a Ryan Vella does a take on the American stuff with the Spider-Man and the recent Silver Surfer one and all that. And I was looking at you should be drawing this stuff over there, because this is just, the artwork alone is stunningly fresh and original and so unlike the generic house styles. And I hate that word. I really hate that word, because it comes up so much with American stuff, and even some of the UK stuff is house style. Okay, you're drawing Spider-Man, here's your John Romeda's, here's your Todd McFarlane's, draw it like that. Okay, you're drawing Fantastic Four, here's your Jack Kirby's, your John Buscema's, and X-Men, or here's your Jim Lee's, and here's your John Burns, draw it like that. Now, I don't want you to draw it like that. I want you to draw it like you want to draw it.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it's a common fallacy and I'll correct this one, because I've always wanted to get onto a forum and correct it. I've done it so many times in writing and people don't get it. When artists started at Marvel in the 60s, the story goes that Stan Lee would come out with Jack Kirby pages and go, draw like that. In the sense that, you have to then swipe Jack Kirby.
Right.
That wasn't what he did. Everyone, and I mean everyone I spoke to, even Rich Buckler, who was an unashamed swiper of Jack Kirby, as you know. What Stan would do was he'd put these pages in front of people and go, see the energy and the pacing and the storytelling on this page. That's what I want you to do.
Right.
And I mean, Gene Colan said, I can't draw like that. He said, I don't want you to draw like that. I want you to study it, the pacing, the storytelling, the dynamics, and the energy that's coming out of it. And I want you to get that in your work.
For sure.
John Romita, he would look at it and go, okay, John Buscema, his first couple of jobs for Marvel in the day, he was basically just swiping Kirby. And we said, don't do that. If I want Jack Kirby, I'll get Jack Kirby to draw it.
Right.
And then he would get Kirby to do the layouts. Now, the layouts, because people sit there and go, oh, they were fully done. Mike Esposito told me that when Kirby did layouts for him, say for the Hulk's head was a circle, 2 dots, and a mouth. That was it.
Yeah.
And he had to create a head out of that. The layouts were just basic stick figures that this will happen in this panel, this will happen in this panel. And then the artist would then do what they had to do.
That's also a beautiful thing at Kirby, though, to allow and to have the strength and belief in the artist that's coming to go mate, here's your thing, do your work, man,
Yeah, and I'm all for it. I sit there, I say to people when they say, how can I become a better artist? And I go, have a look at stuff that for Australians, so that Glenn Lumsden does, or Gary Challoner, or Ryan Vella, or whoever. Pick someone and pick people that work. And when I say work, I don't mean like they've got a job, but their stuff works for you.
Right.
Look at what they did. Study it. Break it down. You don't draw like that, because you're not going to draw like Gary. He's the only one that can draw like Gary. You're not going to be able to draw like Lubbo. He's the only one that draws Lubbo. Or maybe Brian Bolland does now, but that's about it. But, you then look at what they've done, their pacing, their storytelling. And I say that to people when they want to write. One of the best things I got taught, and this was actually in high school in year 12, our year 12 English teacher gave us all books. And he gave me One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Of Mice and Men, Grapes of Wrath, and War and Peace. I gave up on War and Peace because that's just in the bin. And what he said was, I want you to read these books and I want you to write a chapter for these books in that style, but without ripping it off. And I had to go and write an end chapter for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and an end chapter for Grapes of Wrath in both styles. And I'll tell you, if you've ever tried to write something like Steinbeck, don't. You can't. The only one that could write like Steinbeck was Steinbeck. So I sat there for weeks agonizing over this, and I couldn't figure it out. And then suddenly the penny dropped. He doesn't want me to write like Steinbeck. He wants me to get the pacing, the storytelling, the feel, the atmosphere. What made Steinbeck good? His descriptive prose. What made Ken Casey good? his dialogue, and the way he would look at scenes. Okay, that's how you do it. And that's how you do it. I always say this to people when they want to write. Pick your favorite authors. Pick people you love reading. What makes them good to you? Why do you like it? Oh, well, I like the storytelling. Oh, I like the way he writes rabbits. I like the way he does this. Right, well, do that. Find your voice and write it. It's the same with artists. Look at what other people have done. By all means, don't do what you're doing. Don't draw exactly the way they're drawing. You can't draw like Ryan Villa. Only he can. You can't draw. Yeah, you can't draw like Shane Foley. Only Shane Foley can. You can't draw like Angie Spice. She's the only one that can do that. So you pick these people. You look at what they're doing. You go, I like the way Angie frames that panel. I like the way she does that splash page. I love the way Glenn does these covers. Why? Oh, there's a lot of action in it. Or there's so much storytelling. Right, well, that's what you've got to get in yours. You don't have to swipe them. Don't swipe. In fact, I always say to people, don't swipe. It's the old thing that Wally Wood used to say, don't draw when you can swipe, don't swipe when you can trace, and don't trace when you can just paste it up. Yeah, and to me, that's just the...
I think that we've come into an age, though, with it's different. Like I said, the indie community is very different than what's going on in mainstream comic books. You know what I mean? Because like right now there are issues with and we'll use Aliens for an example because I'm a big fan. We use Alien, and you guys have had artists that work for Dark Horse from over there that worked on Aliens and stuff. Great stuff. You know what I mean? Great stuff. And it's right now there have been issues with Marvel literally cutting up old Dark Horse pieces, like literally 5 different pieces from the same dude to make one cover. And when he comes out about it and he's mad about it, they don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Hey, look, this is our cover. We own the product. We bought all the rights from Fox and Dark Horse and whatever. But there are also these things of thought where they're teaching, like right now, holy cow, there are schools that teach you to draw like specific people right now in the industry. And it sounds silly, doesn't it? It sounds silly, but and I don't just mean like an apprentice that came along because you don't want a stylist guy away. You know what I mean? I mean a literal classes to teach you like to draw like so and so. And I find it very different and almost like it's very telling for the industry. It's
the irony of comic books today is that if Jack Kirby came along today, nobody would hire him. If Gene Colan came along today, nobody would hire him either. They'd sit there and go, we can't make it out. It's just all wispy. Jack Kirby would go,
Daniel, I think it's because people just want bloody, like, I mean, splat. Look, I'm one for a good splash page, like, so, I'm probably shooting myself in the foot here, but a lot of the modern comic books now are like foreground, take a photo, stick it in the back, move on to the next page. And, we were sort of having a gas bag the other day on the show, last week's show, about how there's certain eloquences that are gone with comic books now. And I think the beauty of the background, the beauty of how it can play, like into the foreground, the motions, things like that, they're all lost. But I think there comes, it's not just deadlines either. I think there's an element of laziness, man, that's gone into a lot of this stuff, Well,
let's bring Daniel on because I know he's hanging out with us as well and get his opinion on what, as from a different aspect, and a different type of storytelling and stuff. Let's get his opinion on the art styles and people using old school art, additional art styles other than their own. And the biggest one, and we'll jump into it, is the Sentry versus Superman. When we bring Daniel in, and I think Daniel's in the waiting room right now to come in to hang out.
Yep, you ready there, Daniel? Here you come.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, mate.
What's going on, everybody? It's good to brush up with you fellas.
G'day. How are you?
Good. Pleasure to meet you, Daniel, Lee,
Pleasure to meet you as well.
Sizzles, pleasure to meet you all, and of course Dustin,
Yes.
my brother from another mother.
Absolutely,
Good to see you.
man. Why don't you introduce everybody to yourself, and then we'll get into this because I'm very interested in your opinion on almost recycling art styles.
Oh yeah, can't wait to jump into that. What's going on, everybody, and those watching at home? I am Dre the Brute Daniels. I am the creator and owner of the comic label Brutal Planet Comics. I also run a YouTube channel of the same name, talk everything comics and everything that's going on in the media. I'm also a head writer, director, and producer at Brutal Planet Comics, and I write an ongoing series called Treble: The Rhythm Within. It is my, I think Daniel had mentioned earlier about Marlon Brando. It is my Citizen Kane, as it was.
Nice.
It's really it was like a part of me when I wrote that in there. So it feels good to be here with you fellas.
Well, we're glad to have you, man. Super excited about it.
So in regards to, you were mentioning art styles, and because I know you were comparing the Superman Century argument, and Daniel, I could not agree with, like, if you saw me in the waiting room, I was sitting here like an amen corner, just sitting there like, yes. like everything that you said was spot on. And I think, Lee, you would mention something about the idea of laziness being a factor of what's going on, in which what I like to call the doppelganger syndrome. When it comes to doppelganger syndrome, we take a character, we just paint them a different color, but then just call them something different. It's lazy. It's 100% lazy. How many Superman doppelgangers have there been? I don't know, 1,000. It could go on and on. But as far as like the art goes, and the story, Daniel, I think your background, you're a comic historian. Am I right? And when you were telling about the story about when Stan Lee and telling him about, like, hey, copy the energy, not the art. I could not agree more. I could not agree more with that sentiment. But that has been lost over the years. That is, forget lost. It's long gone. It's long gone.
It's dead, buried, man.
Yeah, exactly. And being in the Indies, I've been in the Indies for quite a few years now. Seeing that the creativity of the Indies is what the big two, and heck, I'll throw Image in there too, is what they are, well, what they once stood for, but they're not that anymore. Now it's what I like to call assembly line comics now. Run of the mill, quote unquote safe stories, or whatever quantifiers they want to put on it. That's what it is now. And like, oh, we want it to look like whatever of yesteryear to a degree, so it can be like, oh, it's familiar, so that people would buy it because it's something that their nostalgia goggles will lose their minds, and then they'll be back into it. But unfortunately for the big two, they underestimated how savvy the reading audience is. It's not just, and like, especially when it comes to comics, it's not just a consumer base. Fans of comics in their mind are some of the most creative people. Like I've come in contact with some of the most creative people that aren't even writers themselves, but the comic fan mind, tongue tied. The comic fan mind is different than the moviegoer or the binge watcher or someone that even reads like romance novels. It's different. It's different because the average fan has already played out a whole bunch of scenarios in their head already about their favorite characters. Everybody knows. Like when I grew up, when I came out my mama's womb, I had a Batman comic in my hand. Okay.
I would have had to have seen
an awesome visual
in that. My God.
Do you slap him or do you read his newest book?
What would have been worse if it came out in an acid-proof bag with
a backing board.
But from that day forward, I came up with ideas and stories and things of what I would like to see, adventures. And then even when I was young, I wrote smaller comics. No good, obviously, but the creativity was there. And then I'm looking at what the big two and others, and like even IDW's fallen off a daggone bridge now. They've lost. Dustin had mentioned earlier. They're losing Transformers. They're losing GI Joe. They've lost. It's falling at the wayside. Because lack of creativity. It's the backbone of what makes comics so cool. But now
those guys are becoming like a dent. You know, it's very clinical, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, it is clinical, mate. And yes, the staples would have been quite painful, but also possibly handy. Yeah, but like it is clinical because you do know every issue is safe. Everything does look the same. That's why man, independent is for me, because people do take a chance. You know, the only thing stopping you from, you know, like taking a chance is yourself, really. And that's, you know, people, you know, you do look at. I agree 100% with you. It's like, you know, again, Dustin talks about the Superman Century thing. I mean, God, you could even go so far as to say, you know, Batman Moon Knight. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's multiple, you know, like characters that are derivative of each other. And at one time they were interesting, but now they are no longer. I think people need to take a chance. Stop saying playing safe. Get out there, get people, you know, really make them think, because that's the problem. A lot of people just don't want to think anymore. They just, you know, I mean, God damn, you can read a comic book these days from one of those big two quicker than you can smoke a cigarette.
Right.
Come on, you know, like once upon a time.
Get you some B4B in your life. You need that shit, I promise. You know, there's
and Lee, like I agree with your sentiment 110%. When it comes to even the big two now, like once in a while, I get nostalgic and I order back orders. That's about it. Jones that came out 30 years ago. That's the only things I'm buying. Everything that's coming out now is run of the mill, and not to mention, it's not good. Like so much of it is not good. And I like to grade things on a curve, because when it comes from an analytical mind or someone that produces comics, we're looking at things in a different light. We're looking at pacing. We're looking at shading. We're looking at the colors. We're looking at if the bubbles are popping. We're looking at all.
You got that page turn there, my dude. Let me get some page turn in there.
Yeah,
page turn.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
But now, even I've neglected that aspect of it. All the minute details, and the stories are trash. And so I'm like, I throw me a bone here. So like with Daniel and Lee. We're talking about, indies is on the rise, and it's not incidental. It's because the big two and some of the other ones have faltered, and the savvy reader wants something they can sink their teeth into. And like I've had the pleasure, last night, Dustin was so kind enough to send me some of his terrific work over there at Ethereal Comics, and I couldn't put them down. I was like, oh my God, what time is it? 3 a.m. Like, oh, I guess I gotta get up for work tomorrow, because I was able to sink my teeth into it, and I thoroughly enjoyed what I was engulfing. I haven't had that type of reading experience from the big two in 20 years. So it's an epidemic in general. It's an epidemic for sure.
Right on. I agree. I appreciate the sentiment, man. It's very interesting where, like right now, we look at all these different things, and I see, you know, in the industry, you see things differently, like you mentioned, than people that aren't in it. Like when I got my hands on Battle for Bustle, I was blown away. You know, I was absolutely blown away, because there's things to see in this indie community, and Daniel mentioned it earlier, the stories that are coming out that are different and they're unique. You know what I mean? Like I can't put out a book that's not unique, or I won't do it. You know what I mean? It's against every fiber of my being. Even if it was that book that's going to come out and make, you know, X amount of dollars more than every other book I make, I still can't put it out. I just don't have it in me to give you a story that I've recycled that someone else has put out. And, you know, the argument with that you hear from a lot of people is, well, people have been writing forever and there's no new stories. That's bullshit. There's new stories all the time, and you're just not seeing them because you're looking in the wrong places. You're looking at these guys that you've looked at for so long to continue to bring you these stories, but they're the same dudes that have been writing those same stories. You know, you're not looking at a new outlet for your stories. You're not looking for a new outlet for your new novels. Like if you're a Stephen King fan, okay, and you just stick with Stephen King and guys that write like Stephen King, right? It doesn't, like, you're never going to get anything else out of it. You know, you're still going to be in that same zone for that same type of story that you've been getting from Stephen King for X amount of years. Or you're a Terry Brooks fan and you're getting constant Terry Brooks. You know what I mean? It's very it's sad because human beings are creatures of habit. So we get stuck in our own little loop that we have to break. Or we have to have a buddy that will come out and go, hey, look, have you checked out this new book? This is great. Well, it's an indie title. I'm not in. Just check it out, okay? I mean, I remember when Grimjack came out, I didn't even know what to think. You know, I was like, holy crap. That is so, like, just nitty-gritty, you know, and the storytelling was so wild. And you would almost see a boob, right, in that book. You would almost see a boob, and you were like, holy shit, this is the wildest thing I've ever seen. This guy's drinking beer and talking shit in comic books. And, you know, it's like nowadays I have an entire series that deals with stuff like that. But it's very interesting that we look at these little nuances, and if we show somebody something they've never seen before, that's your hook, man. That's your hook all day. Now I've got something that I've never read before. And it's easy to use B for B because it's my favorite indie book out right now. So there's a concept that Lee goes through with these characters where he's literally teaching you about this world that is goddamn terrifying to begin with. It's absolutely horrifying. You know, it's slave labor at its finest, and it's terrifying. You know, this like, hey, look, you don't have a name, you get a number, motherfucker. That's what you get. And it's like, oh, that's cool. Okay, right on. You know what I mean? It's very dystopian and very interesting to me. So when people come at you and they're like, hey, check this book out, ask them, what do you read? What else do you read? You know, what do you imbibe? Do you read indie books? Do you read things by up-and-coming writers? Do you watch films by up-and-coming directors? You know what I mean? Or do you study, watch, and read the same thing that social media and the world as a whole tells you should? You know, and I think it's very interesting. I can't imagine how cool it is to be Daniel and work in, you know, as a historian and get to look at this cool shit from every different angle. You know, I mean, I don't know, man. It's cool shit.
Okay. There's something that I'm picking up from that. Coming from where I do, I study this stuff and I write about it. Now, the amount of I've lost track of the amount of people that have come to me and go, "Wow, you should write about Jack Kirby and Stan Lee." And I go, "I've got nothing new to say."
Right.
Whenever anyone pitches something to me, you should write about this or you should write about that. I always sit there and think, have I got something new to bring to this? Can I tell this in a way that hasn't been told before? And if I can't, I just say, no, look, I'm not interested. I was asked years ago, you should write about Todd McFarlane and Neil Gaiman. And I went, well, no, because one of my friends in Ireland was doing it, and I've read his book. I thought, actually, I could probably do something different because you've written a history of Miracle Man. And I really just want to, and as I started looking at the legal case of McFarlane and Neil Gaiman, I realized that McFarlane had been sued by so many people over the years. And there was my hook that pretty much nobody outside of that inner circle knew how many times Todd McFarlane had been in court.
Right.
And it was dozens. And they were all great stories. And I found that, you know, that there was reasons why people wouldn't work for Eclipse. There were reasons why things went bad with Todd McFarlane. And there was reasons why Todd McFarlane made hundreds of millions of dollars. There was my hook. And I got an entire book out of that. And, you know, straight away, as soon as I finished that, people go, wow, now you've got to write all about Image Comics. Not really, no, because I can't think of much to write about it. But I can now. And I found another hook that I'm writing about. So as a historian, it's that same thing. Be original. Come up with something. If you want to write or draw Spider-Man, someone says, I'd like to hire you to draw Andre, I'd like to hire you to draw the Fantastic Four. And what I'd expect you to sit there and say is, okay, well, have I got something fresh to bring to this? Because if all I'm going to do is a copy of something that's come before, and I'm going to do a Fantastic Four story for you, and it's going to have them fighting Galactus. Well, okay, well, that's been done 1,000 times. What's the point? Give me something original. When I worked for the ABC, we used to have to do, because they still do radio interviews, and you had a couple of minutes to get this person in, done, finished. And there was a key phrase we used to use was, don't bore us, get to the chorus. And we were doing that before Roxette ever came up with it. And I still sit there and say that if you've got a pitch for me, or if you want me to do something, or if you want to hire me to do something, can I get to that chorus in about 2 seconds? And if I can't, I'm not going to do it. I'm out. So you've got to be original. You've got to come up with something fresh. And it's funny, we talk about the artists. One of the most impactful artists, and you're all going to go, when I say this, Rob Liefeld. Now, everyone rags on Rob. No, and I see you, Dustin, and I'm going to tell you why. Because Rob, and Dre as well, Rob, yeah, okay, no, feet aside. The reason he was so popular, and he was popular, he was huge. He was the Jack Kirby of his generation. And the reason was because his pages, as poorly drawn as you might think they were, had an energy to them. It exploded. And I was wondering why, when I used to look at this, why is this? And then I realized that if you look at an artist's preliminary work, their preliminary sketches, they have a violence and an energy to them, which is often rounded out when it comes time to doing the thing. Rob would just put his prelims in and go, there you go, it's there. So he had that instant energy that comes with doing it. Jim Mooney's preliminary sketches look nothing like Jim Mooney's comic book artwork. The sketches looked better. They looked, primitive, primal. They just sort of punched you in the face. You'd look at them and go, holy cow. And he was just drawing these things really quickly, and there was the panel that he wanted. So Rob Liefeld was doing the same thing. I don't know if he still does it. He probably does, but that's why he was one of the most popular artists of his generation. And it's the same with the Jack Kirby thing. People picked up on Rob Liefeld, and when people go, that's what you need, that's what's selling. So, okay, well, I've got to draw like Rob Liefeld. Oh, God, no, you can't, because only Rob can draw like Rob. Same as only Jack Kirby can draw like Jack Kirby. You know, don't draw like him. See what.
And that's where the 1,000 versions of Jim Lee came in, and the 1,000 versions of Todd McFarlane. They all missed the point. Because, man, actually, I'm not a fan of Rob these days, but I was around and a young fella when he took over the New Mutants, and I have to be honest with you. There's a particular, mate. The first few were pretty good, but there was one issue where I think it was issue 93 where Cable and Wolverine came together and had, you know, a bit of biffo. And I actually remember, I think I was probably about 13 or 14 at the time, and I was looking at that. I must have gone over that comic book 100 times because I had not seen a burst like that.
He's talented. I'm with you. He's incredibly talented. The issue is, like we mentioned, hit or miss earlier. Okay.
Oh, you know, hit or miss.
Right. As an artist, I am, as well as a creator, as a writer, as a publisher, all the different hats. I look at things like, are they consistent with their art style? You know what I mean? Is your work consistently, are you doing hands the same way that you did a hand all the way through? You know what I mean? Are you using, you know, is your character the same height all the way through?
Consistency.
I think that's my only issue with Liefeld, was the fact that he would come out and it was hit or miss on a high ratio, though. You know what I mean? It was very, hey, my Captain America's chest is a quarter of the size of the whole page. You know what I mean? It's
some of that stuff wasn't real.
That mess was hard to watch.
We're still talking about it 25 years later. Yeah, can you think of any other comic that came out at that period that the minute you mention it, people know exactly what it looks like without
And
looking
doesn't
at
that get back to any publicity is good publicity? Because you visually know, like everyone that reads comic books knows those images for good or bad.
Absolutely. Look, at the same time as that, you had that Heroes Reborn or whatever it was. You had Fantastic Four 1, Iron Man 1, Avengers 1, Captain America 1. Tell me what the other 3 comics look like, the front covers.
Oh, I can tell you what the Iron Man one was because it was done by that Will Patasio, wasn't it? And that was him like an Iron Man from like a 3/4 look down, standing there all cabled.
But everyone else is looking at me blankly.
Because I got like literally, I couldn't remember that to save my life.
Tell me what that first Captain America comic looked like that Rob drew.
Yeah.
Oh,
right,
absolutely. Talking about it. Now when I grew up in the 70s, I grew up, the first comics I read were like, John Romita, John Byrne, Walt Simonson, people like that. When I first saw my first Jack Kirby comic, I thought, God, this is crap. It's nowhere near as good as the John Byrne stuff I've been reading. Who is this guy? Because I didn't know that this was a guy that came before and that John Byrne was actually ripping him.
Right.
So, every generation picks what's in front of them and they don't really see what came behind them. Absolutely. That's why you've got all of these Jim Lees and all of these Todd McFarlane clones and that, because they don't see what they were looking at. That's why you need to people, I hate to say it, people like me are a necessity because we need to teach.
100%.
Agreed.
You need to know. If you're doing something, you need to know what happened before it. I mean, I always go for the stories behind the stories. So I think they're far more interesting. You'll never pick up anything I've ever done and read a review or a summary of anything. I can't be bothered. No one wants to know what I think of the latest X-Men. Really, you don't. And if you do, well, I can't help you because I don't think anything of it at all. I really don't.
Hey, Daniel, you mind if I ask you something?
Please.
You mentioned earlier before, in regards to your Fantastic Four example, about like if somebody was hired to do the Fantastic Four again or what have you. And of course, the generic thing, hey, Fight Galactus, of course, is done a bazillion times. With that in mind, I wanted to ask you, if, in your opinion, if an artist is presented that by the publisher or whoever else, do you think they should turn that down? Because there's fan backlash too, and that's why it's going to be a little complicated question. Because of course it's going to be creatively bankrupt. Period. No way, no how. It's going to be. But at the same time, if they take on the job and do something creative with it, we've seen how fans react to new creative direction. Like recently, they changed the Punisher logo, and everybody lost their freaking minds. So in that instant, if you are an artist and you were posed with that, what would you do in that situation? I know it's a complicated question, but what do you think would be the good move to do?
If you were coming to me and you were saying, so Trey, you come to me and you go, look, Marvel have just offered me the Fantastic Four. I'd go, right. First off, there's a lot of money in it for you. Right. And I'm not ever going to deny anyone for doing anything for the money, because you got to eat. We all got to eat. We've all got to pay the rent to keep the roof over their heads. I've got to buy my books, for example. So yeah, you got to do what you got to do. And if you're just starting out, yes, because more people are going to see that than what are going to see the amazing Banana Man comic that you're doing, and you're doing a print run of 100 copies of. More people are going to see one issue of Fantastic Four than Banana Man. So yeah, go for it. And then you come to me and you go, oh, look, they want me basically to do a Paul Ryan version. Okay, can you do it? If you can do it, do it. Put your own unique take on it, though. And slowly but surely, as you go along, start losing that Paul Ryan approach and start putting in your own approach, subtly, backgrounds, foregrounds, and just keep moving it forward until at the end of that run, you're doing full Andre.
Okay.
And your editor and your writer has gone, fingers crossed, they've gone all the way along. We like where you're going with this. So by the end of what you've done, You've done it full on. If they go just one book and it's a fill-in, and you need to do it like Jim Lee, because Jim Lee was doing the book on either side. Go, okay, well, if I can do it, I'll do it. Because again, it's money and more people are going to see it. If you're an established artist, you can then sit there and go, no, hang on. If you hire me, it's because you want to see. If I hire Andre, it's because I want to see your art. I'm not going to hire you and go, I'm hiring you, mate, because I love your art. By the way, can you draw this like Walt Simon? Go hire
I reckon a prime example of that, Daniel, sorry to interrupt, is Bill Sankiewicz. I think that's how you pronounce his name, doing Moon Knight, where he was basically did a Neil Adams version in Moon Knight, and then slowly over like 15 or 16 issues, you started seeing Bill. And then Bill finished his run on Moon Knight, went straight into that Demon Bear saga in New Mutants, and man, like visually, that's some stunning stuff. And then he's just, veered off into Bill's world. You know Bill when you see Bill, but I mean, he had to do the Neil Adams stuff, because that was what was the hot take at the time with Moon Knight.
But I think that's part of it, right? We have to go in and we have to make our way, because if like right now, when we put out The Listener, and I love Listener, it's one of my favorite books that we put out, but at the same time, it's very niche storytelling, right? So when we came out, we put BGD out, which was easy for people to vibe with. It was like, holy cow, now there's quadruple the amount of people purchasing that book, you know what I mean? And people are paying attention to that book and they're all over that one. But it's like, if I had started with that, cool, look, it may not be where it is now, but it would have been a different type of following than we have now, so it's like nobody knows you. Like, what they put those memes out and they're like, if you didn't love me for my fucking shitting in my diapers as a toddler, you don't get to love me as my, my famous guy in my 30s. You know what I mean? It's, and that's it's a cool way to look at things, because we as human beings, we evolve just like anything else. And we, our skill sets evolve, and we start gaining traction. That's not even talking about the time. The longer you've been doing something, chances are the better you are at it, and the more fans, the more followers, and whatever else you have. And your skill set, you know what I mean, is going to be different 10 years down the line than it was when you first started. That's
what I was coming back with Andre, with the thing. If you're starting out, I imagine you would do. I mean, I did. I wrote about music and I wrote about bands that I absolutely cannot stand, but it was money. Yeah. And I had to eat. And I had to buy clothes and do things. And over the years, I could then go to the editors of the magazines, and they'd go, "Oh, we'd like you to write about something for Kate." I'd go, "I can't stand them. I've never heard them, and I don't want to. I'd rather write about Kiss." "Oh, okay, no worries." Okay, so now you're not hiring me because you know I can pump this out. You're hiring me because I've pitched you an idea, and you want me. So with you, the young artist, maybe you have to do what you have to do. And that's a huge book to be on. It'd be like going, "Oh, they're hiring me to do Batman." Go for it. Do it. You're going to get a lot of exposure. You're going to get a lot of money out of it. There's a lot in there. But 10, 15 years down the track, if I hire you, it's because I want you, your style, your unique approach to something, not because I want you to be someone else. And that's why I'm going to hire you. So starting out, sure, you do what you do. And I know that's a long-winded answer.
No, Danny, no. That explanation is perfect, and that's kind of what I was. That's what I had in my mind. But I know that you are more versed in it due to your history background, for sure. I just wanted to see like where your mind would have been on that, and I think your explanation is absolutely spot on.
Okay, I mean, I'd never deny anyone doing a job, because like I said, we do this stuff. I mean, I do my stuff. I sell very few copies. I do it because I love doing it, and I want to do it
for the love of the game.
I'd like to see your Joy Division book, Daniel, on Ian Curtis and Unknown Pleasures there, mate. Get one of them out.
No. And I'm in a blessed position that my wife has a good enough job that she can carry us both. I pick up the little bits of paying work here and there to pay my way as best I can. So I'm blessed in that regard. I'm not struggling to eat. I'm not struggling to pay the rent. 25 years ago, I was struggling to eat and struggling to pay the rent. I was having to sell things to do that and do menial jobs like call center stuff because it just wasn't paying.
Yeah.
Now, if someone approaches me and says, would you like to write something for us, blah, 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 I go, yeah, well, you know what you're going to get. And I'm going to pick what I want to write because I want to write what I want to write about, not what, and I've had people come to me and they go, we'd like you to write something about Marvel Comics. Not interested. Not interested. When you're starting out, you have to do what you have to do.
Of course.
You reach a point, and I've reached this point where I say that there are certain tier levels for me. One, I will pay you to work for you because I admire you that much and I know you got nothing. Two, I will work for free because I know you got nothing and that's fine. Three, it'll be my minimum rate. Give me a couple of comic books. Give me whatever you've got. Four, it's my rate, and that's that. Five, it's over my rate because I don't really want to do it. Six, you can't afford it, so I'm going to pitch a number at you, which if you give it to me, sure, no worries, because that's going to set me up for a fair few years now down the track. Will set me up for the rest of the year, and I'll quite happily do it for you because you're an idiot. You paid so much money for this, and it's probably going to be crap. But I don't want to work for you. I'm going to put this amount out there. We'd like you to do a book. Sure, no worries. $45,000 advance. Thank you very much.
Hello.
We're not giving you that. I'm not giving you a book. That's how it works. But I'm, as I said, I'm blessed to be in a position where I can do that. Other people aren't, and I know that, and I know it hurts. And they look at you and they think, "Oh, it's all right for you." Go, yeah. Oh, we've all been there.
Yeah,
we've all been there.
Absolutely.
Every single one of us has been there where we go, I have to now go and sell my robot from Lost in Space that I've had for years and I really love because I am going to be evicted if I don't.
Yep.
I have to go and sell those box sets that I got for Christmas over a couple of years, and they're the only things that remind me of an ex-girlfriend. I have to go and sell them now because I've got to eat. So be it.
You ain't wrong.
And we get into the position where down the track, if we're lucky, we can then sit there and find these things again and go, I'm going to buy it back because it's got a memory.
Right on.
Yeah. I think when you're doing this sort of stuff, though, too, it's a compulsion, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, it's a drive that you have that I don't think, whatever you are, a sportsman or an artist or, like anything really, when you have that personal drive and your goals may be, for, Andre and Dustin, to be, you may get to one day want to be a quarterback and, you get to your Tom Brady levels, but you may be that poor bugger that, doesn't get out of college, but they're still down there on a Sunday flinging that ball around, the same as, artists are and writers are still trying to chip away. And, people will tell you all the time, why are you doing this? Why, what are you getting out of this? And there's nothing, and if they ask that question, they aren't going to get it, they're not understanding. You just have to keep plodding forward 1 foot at the same time. That's why I keep saying is if you listen to everyone that told you shouldn't be doing something or, don't do it, you wouldn't bloody get anywhere. You just got to keep plugging away.
Agree.
Agreed. And, Shane put a beautiful thing up on Facebook this morning that came from someone. It's not a waste of time if you enjoy it. And I mean, primarily at the end of the day,
true.
If it gives you something and it gives you a fulfillment and, or a spiritual, level that you're happy and you can, and you're happy and nice and you feel like you're doing something in life, then that's a damn good place to start, I reckon.
Absolutely. And Andre, the other thing always to remember, and I always say this to people, and they get a bit ratty at me, is you've got a shelf life. You've got a limited shelf life. And if you can make hay while that sun's shining, make as much as you possibly can.
Makes
and
sense.
put as much possibly aside as you can, because at some point, it happens to everyone. I don't care who you are. It happens to everyone. They're going to say, we're not hiring you anymore.
Yep.
I remember Norm Brayfogle.
Great artist.
2005, I think it was, trying to get work and Marvel Comics. I'm not going to say who the editor was, I thought, saying to him, You have to send us samples to show us what your style is like.
Ooh.
And he was working for Archie Comics at the time. And I contacted the editor and I said, he's working for Archie. Why don't you just pick up an Archie comic? No, I don't buy the opposition's comics. He has to show us he can draw. But you hired him 18 months ago to do an Avengers annual and a Hellcat 3-issue miniseries. Nothing's happened between now and then to change his style. But no, he was forced towards the end there to actually show samples of what he could do. If anything, his art got better. So you will hit a shelf life. And once that's finished, the struggle begins again.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I'm trying to get in. Oh, how old are you, Andre? You're 40? Oh, mate, you're old.
Yeah.
That's what you hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're 20, 40 is ancient. When you're 50, 40, God, I wish I was that young. You will hit that shelf life. So yeah, if again, using your thing, if someone were to come to you and go, they want me to do the event, Fantastic Four, go for it. Cash it in. Cash in. Get the cash.
Yeah.
Do it for the money. Why not? Whore yourself, because
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot less painful than the alternative.
You know, Daniel, if better said it, because my wife says the same thing all the time. I'm like, baby, I'm about to go prostitute myself. You already know what I gotta go. I gotta go put it out there. She be like, yep, go get my money. I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Our one here is well,
it's like Eddie Murphy in Raw and Delirious. Show me the money, Eddie.
Show me the money. Speaking of which, Lee, I'm glad you were talking about New Mutants a second ago. You know, I never followed any of the New Mutant runs except for I believe the Extinction Agenda. I think that's the only run I actually follow. I as you were talking about it, I'm like, yo, you know what? I need to go back and check those out, because I was never a fan of like all the X-Men offshoots. I wasn't really like in the X-Force or
well, the New Mutants, man, was the first X-Men offshoot. 1981, 82, something like that. I think it came out, and I think it was Claremont and Bob McLeod, possibly from memory, that did it, and that was probably I think it hit well, but it wasn't until Bill came along with the Demon Bear saga, which was the one that really kicked it into seriousness. But then, like all things, they had multiple artists, Brett Blevins, different people came and went, guest artists, you know, that sort of thing. And then Liefeld, booted it again, and then it went to X-Force. But the New Mutants was good in its time, man. Like it just, you know, like what they tried to do. I guess it was the original generation. You remember Gen X?
Yeah,
Gen X was great.
Yeah, I do remember Gen X.
Well, the New Mutants, well, that's here we go, is the rehash, because the New Mutants basically became Gen X, you know, like for the 90s kids that didn't get it in the 80s and that. But no, the New Mutants,
for sure.
Yeah, it's like all those offshoots just didn't resonate with me. Even like, was it Alpha Flight?
Alpha Flight was just that goes hand in hand with the whole you know, the recolor, you know what I mean? Alpha Flight was Canada's X-Men.
Yeah,
if we're being real about it, it's, you know, you had a team of mutants, run by one dude that acts just like Cyclops. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing, like because I was still stuck on the Uncanny run until it freaking ended. When I had to transition into Ultimate, broke my freaking heart, because I just broke my heart. Like the less I talk about Ultimate X-Men, the higher my life expectancy is. You know, but
I think that Ultimate. So I think that goes hand in hand with what Daniel was saying, though. There's a shelf life for everything. You know what I mean? And Ultimates was their way of trying to revitalize characters that have been around for 30, 40 years at a time. You know, so at the time they were literally like, well, here's our new characters. Wait a minute, what? I know that character. That's not a new character, but they're redesigned. They look a little bit different.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. But Ultimates was a much darker story than Marvel had been putting out previously. So it was interesting to see their characters in a different light. Like they did that run with Wolverine and the Hulk, which never got completed, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it got finished.
Was that the Versus run?
Well, it was.
Yeah,
The one where he pulls him in half.
Yeah.
I think that I don't think they finished that. I think it only ran like 3 of the 5 issues that were supposed to come out. But yeah, it was very dark. It was very brutal. I mean, you had the Hulk at the time. They were already telling you that the Hulk knew who he was. They were already telling you, which they later told you in World War Hulk. You know what I mean? That Bruce Banner has been Hulk the whole time, which is contradictory to everything else they've ever told you throughout the years. You know what I mean? So, and that goes hand in hand with the Immortal Hulk that just came out, where they're saying it's 2 different entities again. So it's very, I don't know, it's very cliche with those characters. Yeah. But he was literally sitting with a harem of women, and I had never seen outside of Marvel. If you guys remember Marvel,
the OG Captain Marvel.
No, the series Marvel. It actually had Greg Horn on it, and who Greg's great in his right. You know what I mean? He's a good guy. I do a lot of shows with him. Super nice dude. But he put out the Marvel stuff along with the Emma Frost stuff. It was about the same time period. But those were the raciest books that I'd ever seen Marvel put out, right? You can't even get Marvel anymore unless you're.
Oh, let's not forget those bloody crap swimsuit editions they used to put out back in the bloody early 90s. Get out of here, you know.
I still got my Lady Death joint. Okay, I still got my Lady Death swimsuit edition. That's my
Marvel was different though at the time. Marvel was trying to catch up on things that other people were doing with you're looking at your Purgatories and your Lady Deaths and your what was it, Chastity at that time period.
Oh, yeah.
They also put out Barbed Wire came out around that time period as well. You know, I can get into comic history with you. There's some cool books that came out, but there's also some real cringy books that came out too. You know,
look, I'm with Daniel. I'm about to take another drink. I'm with Daniel.
It started getting real cringy. I mean, because you have to remember there were indie books at the time period as well, putting out some real rough stuff.
Man, I gave up on the Incredible Hulk when he went back to being green because I liked it when he was grey and that little nightclub. You know what I mean? Like that.
Well, he's back to grey
again
that
now, run.
Apparently.
What was he? What did he call himself? Joe Fix It.
Joe
or something
like Mr. Fix It.
Mr. Fix It. Yep.
Yeah.
Lee, also, my man. That was the whole Patch Adams thing in Japan.
Yeah. And then he met Wolverine on like that great cover where Wolverine and him are, you know, like leaning against each other.
Well, they're bringing that back right now. Speaking of rehashing old stories.
Oh no!
At one point in time, you had Wolverine, the Gray Hulk, Spider-Man, and Ghost Rider were the Fantastic Four.
Yeah. Arthur Adams did it. Fantastic Four.
Well, that's about to happen again. That's literally about to happen again with the same cast.
No, don't destroy my child.
Exactly. Don't be smirched. Don't be smirched.
There's a piece of me gonna die if I see that in the comic book shop. I'll just keel over. I'll be like, "What? Hey, dude, get up! I can't.
Yeah,
I can't feel my legs now." You know?
It's funny. With the Hulk, I think the best explanation I've ever seen of that whole Bruce Banner Hulk thing, and you can scream at me now if you want, was in that Avengers movie.
Right, I'm always angry.
They say turn into the, you have to get angry. And he said, no, that's the trick. I'm always angry.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has to fight to stay calm.
Well, that's what he came out of.
He's always the Hulk.
For sure. Well, he actually, if you read the World War Hulk stuff in the very last issue, there's a panel of him sitting in a restaurant, and Amadeus Cho walks in, and he's like, "Hey," and he's like, "How'd you know I'd be here?" And he was like, "I'm your best friend. I always know where you're at, you know." And he's like, "Well, I have something to tell you." And he was like, "Go ahead, let it out, because I've known the whole time." And he was like, "What?" He's like, "Man, you've been the Hulk the whole time." And he was like, "Yeah, you know, it's been me the whole time." It's you know, everybody was like, "Well, it's a Jekyll and Hyde type of syndrome with him," and he loved being the Hulk for sure. but he was the Hulk. There was no, he kept saying it's an elaborate ruse, the whole deal. You know what I mean? But, you know, they just cheapened the character with that
I was thinking the
Hawkeye
same
kills
thing.
him deal. And he comes back and he's got this Immortal Hulk book where he turns into the Hulk at night under the moon. You know what I mean? Which is just
what?
Are you serious?
Yeah,
That's Hulk like now a green werewolf.
That's
yeah,
correct.
he's like a giant green werewolf, basically. Yeah.
Okay, that's not original, because if you read the first issues of the Hulk when Jack Kirby and Stan Lee were doing them, those first ones with Steve Ditko especially, that's how he changed. He would be Bruce Banner during the day, and at night he would turn into the Hulk.
Right, there you go.
That's wild.
And
I
so
didn't know
there's,
that.
No
there's
way.
these great issues. That's why you see these ones where he'd go down into a vault
Yeah.
underground, and they'd close it off, because at night he'd turn into the Hulk and be pounding on these walls. And
Right
Rick
on.
Jones would go, "I'm not letting you out because I love you."
Well, there you go.
So,
You're rehashing
so, yeah,
the same
that's,
shit again.
that's not original. I got bad news for whoever's writing that. Yeah. What is that one in South Park? Simpsons did it. It's been done.
That's funny.
Was that back in the old Tales to Astonish days and stuff
Yeah.
like
Well,
that?
the first 6 issues of the Hulk
Yep.
that came before Tales to Astonish,
Right.
and that's what the Hulk did, was he changed into the Hulk at night.
The miniseries, yeah.
Wow.
So
The first
cool.
6 issues of the Hulk, way back in the 1960s, before anyone was born except for maybe Sizzle, and he was already 25 at the time. That's how he changed.
That's so cool. You know, and it's wild that we're going through these things and we're seeing them all over again. You know, it's like
Everything old is new.
no, absolutely. Well, you know, once again, human beings are creatures of habit. You know what I mean? If it did well then, it's going to do well now. You
And I
know,
bet you someone's pitched that and someone's gone, "Wow, that's really fresh and original. I've never seen that before." No, because you've never read them, have you? You never studied the character. Again, that's why historians and the history comes into vogue. You need to know the
Yeah.
story.
well, it's just like editors, right? I'm a firm believer in we need editors all day long. You know what I mean? Editors, you know, one thing that I think that we're moving out of in modern industry right now is inkers. I think that artists are getting to the point where they're inking their own work more and more often than they were before. So you're seeing less and less inkers, but at the same time, you're seeing more editors, which is great. You know what I mean? You're seeing a lot of folks that are coming in and doing the work. Like I put my first book out, and I'll never forget, it was me and my wife. My wife was editing it, and it was like, wonderful woman, super intelligent, you know, and well versed in the English language, we'll put it that way. But it was like, holy cow, when I went and I got a professional editor, the world changed. You know what I mean? After book 1, it was like, holy shit. You know, same thing with like your letterer. You know what I mean? The minute you go from lettering it yourself to having a professional letterer do it, because you don't have to save a few bucks anymore, it's a whole different ball game. You know, and I feel bad for Lee over there putting in 50 bajillion lines like he does, and then going and inking bajillion lines. It's like, Jesus Christ.
It's my therapy, man.
For sure. We joke a lot. I joke with a couple of my cover artists because a couple of them really like to use negative space, and I'll be like, "Man, you know, there's a lot of empty space in there." And he goes, "Yeah, the colors fix that. It'll be great." You know what I mean? And you're like, "Okay, right on," and they will, and it'll be great regardless. But at the same time, you're like, see how many lines our art director put on his latest cover? What's up, man? Where you at? What's going on? You know, and that's another important thing, having, you know, and I know that Daniel does all his stuff, and it's like, I can't express to you how important it is as you go forward to build out, you know what I mean, in groups of people you can work with and trust. Having an art director was something I never imagined when we first started. You know, it was like, oh yeah, you know, all my designs are great. Yeah, you know, not all of them are great. You know what I mean? So you have somebody else that's been doing this for a long time come in and go, hey, look, maybe we change this or this, and it elevates your concepts. You know, so that whole look at Daniel laughing. He's like, oh, all these fuckers are doing their stupid shit.
No, because I've got a funny story about that. This just prompted me. I once Alan Kupperberg, the late Alan Kupperberg, once sent me an entire Captain America story that he did in pencil. Okay, that's fine. And literally every panel has got remarks on it from Jim Shooter. And it's got circles and it's got written, this is shit. This is crap. With this guy's leg, this doesn't work. This is hope. And every page is just mercilessly pulled apart by the editor. And at the end, it's got, go and do it again.
Can you imagine, though, Jim Shooter coming at your pages, though? Man, I wouldn't even know what to think. I'd just be like, ah.
But I said to Alan, that's horrible. He goes, no, actually, he was right. He said, if you look at what we published, completely different to what I drew. He said, because the first thing he did it really quickly and sent it in. And it came back with this, we're not publishing this because it's hopeless.
Right.
So that's what just reminded me, a good editor. Yeah, a good editor should be sitting there and going, yeah, that's not working.
Right. It's so integral because, as cool as we think something is or how great as the story may be to us, those other eyes on things are so important, man. They really are so important because you turn around and you're like...
It's so important to learn as well, man. Like in my case, like I've spoken to Shane and you, Dustin, about this. Like I spent years just here by myself doing my thing for, because I had that compulsion to get it done. And I was a bit of a... Look, for lack of a word, I've said this before, a dickhead, because, I thought to myself, like, nah, like I'm not doing anyone else's thing. I don't, like you get caught up in that whole jive. And then, like once Shane and, like with ComX put forward, the drink and draw and the community got bigger and, because Andre, for your info, man, every Friday night, our time in Australia, ComX puts forward a Friday night drink and draw, and we get an artist or a creator, and there's several other artists that come on and they have beers or yarn and that sort of stuff, and they draw their characters. So you're basically with other people. You're seeing their thank you, Gary. I needed that clarification, champ. Good on you, mate. And I'm sure he'll remind me of that later.
Yes.
And you get to see other people's interpretations, styles, the way they do things, what they've got, what they're doing. And then you meet other people that are writers and that. And I found a huge, you just find yourself improving, like
really cool
from looking outside of yourself. And, you're not going to like everyone's work and not everyone's going to like your work. I mean, that's just how it is in life, but you can definitely take bits and pieces of ideas and, information and, like what you're watching. And that's helped me immensely. So I get where you're coming from, Dustin. More eyes, man, to let you know. Because I'll tell you what, Tam will let me know. I could be sitting there thinking like, man, I've done the best drawer. And she'll come in and go, I've seen better. And then walk out. And I'm like, back at it,
Drop the bomb and roll out.
There's a part of that, though, which I always say to people that look for different eyes and look for different opinions. That's fine. But when the criticism comes in or the comments, ignore the non-constructive ones.
For sure.
So, I would get letters when I was writing for magazines and they go, he sucks. I'm going, yeah, no worries, so do you. Boom. Whereas if someone had written in and go, look, that article was not that good because of blah, so they go, okay, yeah, that's a valid point. I'll improve myself. And I always say to people, only go for the constructive criticism because there's going to be, out of the 10 people on the planet, 8 of them are going to tell you that you suck, you're a dickhead, and you're no good. Forget them. You never had them. You're never going to get them. Listen to the 2 that are going to go, yeah, it sucks because of this, or it's not that good because you didn't draw that properly. Exactly. And that's the thing with the America pages. Every comment on there is cruel but accurate.
Yeah.
And I just think, I can see where he was coming from now, because even the ones where he's circled a head, he's gone, this isn't a head. I don't think, he's right. It's not. It's not a head.
What was it, an elbow up there?
It's really bad. I always say, take the constructive criticism. Always be, don't listen. You really don't need to listen, because my argument to them is, okay, well, show me what you've done. And then it's generally get stuffed. Yeah, okay, well, that sucks too, pal. That's not original.
It is funny how the most criticism come from the people that realistically haven't got anything to show. I try not to worry about those people either and just move on. It's you get a bit of flack, but I mean, whatever. I don't know, man. I think you got to be happy with yourself too. And you're right, Daniel. Like, constructive criticism's the best. You know what I mean? Like, because it's there to improve you. You know what I mean? When you're getting and you should acknowledge that. Like, it's there to help. But when you just get your guys that want to let you know, they're varying ideologies about your personality and what you're putting on paper, and they've got no idea what's going on, and the only thing they've ever put pen to paper to was, the lotto numbers at the news agents, you know what I mean? I sort of don't factor that into taking it personally. So I'm 100% with you, man. But lucky with the community in Australia that I've found and the people that I deal with, I'm quite sure, like everywhere, there's an element of toxicity, floating on the surface, and that you're never going to escape that. But the people that I've had time to do and, taken the time to, I guess, mentor me and discuss things with me and stuff, man, have always been constructive. And I get the general impression, and I really do, that they're there to help and improve, not hinder, or, like rabbits, man, at a fence, like in plague times, they all run over the top of each other. They're not there to do that. They're there to put a hand down and help you up, mate, Exactly. And that's the sort of people you want to go for. You just got to work out who the right people are and who aren't. And as you said, shut the door on the ones that just want to throw stones at you. It's just, okay, that's cool, man.
Exactly.
Half the time you don't even have the wherewithal to throw the stone. You know what I mean? Half the time you get people that are jealous of your where you are, what you've succeeded in. I feel like somebody said, I can't remember who said it, there's always somebody that wants what you have. You know what I mean? And a lot of times they'll break you down because they're jealous of what you've accomplished. So you may not have 1 million followers or 1 million backers or 1 million fans, but you have great fans. You know what I mean? They're there for a reason. So ignoring the flack from the one dude that wishes he was you and wishes he was putting out stuff for Brutal Planet, that's integral for your your own well-being, your mental well-being. Because this job can be taxing, like emotionally taxing, physically taxing, because you're constantly going, am I good enough? Do I need to be here? You know what I mean? It's like you ask Lee, he'll tell you, I battled imposter syndrome for a good year before I felt like I was able to be part of the community and my books were worth a shit. You know what I mean? So we don't need people that are telling us what we already tell ourselves. You know what I mean? We need the positive influences in our lives that can, and with social media, especially, social media opens a world for people to reach out to you, especially like me. All my stuff's public. Everything I do is public. So everybody can see it and talk and be involved, and say their opinions. And the funny thing is, it is really cool. You'll find the negative people are run out by the positive people. Like, I don't even have to defend myself anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, I'll get on, and if somebody says something negative, somebody's on there like, motherfucker, what have you put out? And it's like, oh, okay. Well, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you.
One of my favorite stories.
And I couldn't agree more. Like what Lee said and what Dustin said, constructive criticism, and Daniel, of course. Constructive criticism, I think, is the key for everybody to improve. I like to use what I like to call the compliment sandwich. I tell you, like, if somebody presents like their work to me, or like, hey, Dre, what do you think about this story or this art or whatever the case may be? I do the compliment sandwich. I tell you something you're doing really, really well. I sandwich it with something that I think you can improve on, and then I finish up with something that you're doing well. because
Nice.
it's a good way to one, because like as Dustin mentioned about imposter syndrome, like we as creators, especially in the independent community, like we grew up reading things that are larger than life and bigger, that's influenced our lives, and now we're in that industry. It's really easy for us to be like, I'm not good enough. Oh man, my story doesn't compare to X, Y, Z. We're already beating ourselves up off the jump. So to have somebody come and punch us in the face some more, that doesn't help. But I feel like if and as the overwhelming majority of the comic book community has been very encouraging. There's always some bad apples in there that, as you all mentioned, are just there to tear you down or want what you had, or they just ain't no good at nothing, and therefore they're trying to destroy what you're trying to build. But the overwhelming majority that I've met and I've interacted with God knows how many people now, have been very encouraging, upbuilding, and those that have criticism, I always check the receipts. And what I mean by that is, what qualification does this person have to legitimately judge my work? And that's where things get interesting. If you're just some schmuck, bye, bruh, there's nothing you can say to me. But if you have experience in here, or editing experience, or like there's one of my good friends who's a professor, and he's also a comic critic, one of my very good friends. And he, when he first saw my comic years ago, he gave me some very, very helpful, constructive criticism. And I was like, hey, you got the receipts, you know what you're talking about, I'm gonna go ahead and take that to the bank. But if some dude named Bob, who's just chilling, is gonna sit there and say, hey, yo, you suck, I don't like your art, whatever, I'm like, listen, Bob, there's a lake, you can jump in it. I mean, you know, and it's about pretty much pushing out the senseless negativity, because criticism, though constructive, can hurt, but there's no reason for it to be a negative spin in order to bring down either who you are as a creator or your self-esteem. There's no reason for it to be that way. So absolutely, I co-sign with all you guys and what you're talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, we're winding down, I think, guys. You want to go ahead and give us your? Oh, there's a kitty.
Yeah.
Oh, well, again.
My kitten has a tendency to walk across my keyboard, so I'm just nipping that in the bud before he does it.
What do you guys want to let us know what you're working on right now, Daniel? You and
Yeah, Daniel, I'll bring you up and you can show us your book.
Oh, that's the latest book.
Lean forward.
Lean forward. There you go. How cool is that?
No. Your voice is cutting out.
Oh, of course it is. That's the latest book. Awesome. It's about a comic book artist, an Australian guy. Over these years, and was locked up, put in prison, never to be released, died in jail. I managed to get hold of a whole pile of court transcripts, records, all kinds of things that nobody's seen before, and pieced together what he actually did. And it's funny because there's always been these urban myths about what he did. What he did was actually worse than what people think he did.
Oh, wow.
Very nasty person. That's available via Amazon at the moment. Or you can, I've still got a couple of copies left here that I'm quite happy to sign and send off to people. And I've got to get some copies off to Mr. Sis at some stage. Yes,
Sounds
I'll
cool,
do that
man.
this week. So,
I always like that wild stuff that you don't hear about. You know what I mean?
It's a very disturbing read. I actually had a few people contact me saying they couldn't read all of it because it's just a bit too full on for their liking.
Oh, wow.
I knew I'd hit the mark when Steve Bissett sent me a message going, man, this is just a hard slog because this guy is so fucking horrible. Like, yes, if I freaked out the master of horror, I'll freak everyone out. But yeah, at the moment, other than that, I'm working on a book about Cyclone Comics, which will be coming out later on this year. And I've also got a couple of other projects boiling. I'm working on a book about, ironically enough, how Todd McFarlane and his Spawn movie changed the way superhero movies were made forever.
Oh,
And
cool.
it's not the way you think it is. So I'm having to go back and have a look at how crappy 80s, 70s, and 90s superhero movies were. With the crappiest of them all, Steel, which cost, I think, $15 million to make and made less than $1 million at the box office. Well,
Is that the one with
Daniel, why'd you
Shaquille
mention that
O'Neal
movie?
playing the superhero?
Oh, God.
Shaquille O'Neal, yeah.
Yeah, not great.
I felt my diabetes flare up just now, Danny. The moment you mentioned that. Oh,
Man, you know what's funny? Everybody's like, they all talk about like Deadpool and what Deadpool's done for the community. Speaking of movies and whatnot, the first rated R Marvel movie. That's not the case. Blade was the first rated R Marvel movie.
What about The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren?
That
Wasn't
was-
that R-rated back in the day?
That was made in Queensland. I always
And
point
Louis
out
Gossett Jr., you can't go past him, man. You know,
I've mentioned this in the book. It's like that bad.
if you've never seen Enemy Mine with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett
God.
Jr., where he's an alien that gives birth in a
Please,
I love that.
Stop the
slime.
madness.
That's great.
Oh,
Who doesn't want to see Dennis Quaid giving birth?
Oh,
God.
man.
Enemy Mine was great. I mean, as a kid, the only thing I didn't like from that time period that was sci-fi was that show. What was the show with they had the aliens that looked like they had like the peanut heads? You know what I'm talking about?
Babylon 5.
No, it was like in modern like day and like
Oh,
you know what I'm
Oh,
talking
what
about?
you're talking
Alien
about.
Alien Nation.
That's it.
Never
That movie was good, man. I liked that movie. The
couldn't do
movie
that
with
one.
James Caan was killer, man, back in the day. The TV show maybe not so good.
The
but, you know.
TV show was so bad, I couldn't get through it.
Oh, man, I grew up on all that stuff. Do you remember that cool 80s B-grade sci-fi movie too called Ice Pirates? Do you remember
Nope.
that? Where dudes used to break into like spaceships and steal their ice, and they used to have these karate robots and stuff
That's
like
awesome.
that. That was cool.
You know, I tell you what,
I don't want to.
before we get out of here and before we let Dre get in with his stuff, and we'll talk about a little bit of Battle for Bustle and what else we've got going on. If you haven't watched the new Ghostbusters movie, you need to watch it. You just need to watch it. It is all the film is fan service, the entire film, and it was just
okay.
really cool to see them, pay homage to everything that came before and all the characters from before. It's a fun film. It's really. My wife and I were watching it the other night, and we're just like, man, that's our childhood on the TV. They've literally went back. It's almost like they redid the entire first film with a younger cast, and it was very interesting. And to see what they did with Harold Ramis and stuff was very, very cool.
If you're going to put my childhood into a film, then I'm still cheesed that Nicholas Hammond doesn't pop up in the latest Spider-Man movie.
Oh my goodness.
Right on. I'm with you on that. I mean, I'm with you on that. I'm still tired of Teeny Bopper Parker. So,
Oh God.
I'm well past that.
I want a geriatric Spider-Man.
That's right. But you know what? Not even geriatric. Give me the end. I don't know if you read the end, but the end was probably the most real and wild Spider-Man story. If you guys haven't read the end, you really need to read it. It was a short mini-series about what it was like to really be Peter Parker and age, and Mary Jane's death, because of the fact he was radioactive and touching her and around her all the time and inseminating her quite a bit, I'm sure.
Most
You know what I
definitely.
mean? So, well, he talks about it in the book. He talks about her death and that being the cause of it, the radiation poisoning from being around him and, kissing him and touching him and stuff all the time. So, but it goes back into that very famous, you get to see geriatric Sinister Six and stuff, and you get to, it's very dark. The book was very, very dark. And then you run into the Venom symbiote at the end of it, which was very interesting because it was like old school Venom not all this Donny Cates craziness, but like old school,
Oh.
you know, the fact it was in love with Peter and all this other stuff. It's very, very interesting stuff. But check it out. Anyway, so what do you got going on right now, Dre? You working on
All
anything?
right. So we have recently at Spinwiz Comics and the Spinwiz app released Trouble, The Rhythm Within, part 5 of my, oh my God, that glare. Part 5 of my ongoing series of Trouble. I am really looking forward to the reviews. A couple of people have checked it out already and are really, really excited about it. So I am super stoked that folks are getting their hands on it. It can be ordered for a digital download and paperback, print on demand on spinwiz.com and Spinwiz app. Or if you want a little signatures, you can just hit me up on any of those social media platforms that you see right there. And I'd love to send anybody a signed digital copy. Signed paper copy. And also, of course, on YouTube, Brutal Playing Comics, doing reviews on cool comic stuff and doing interviews with great folks like Dustin. So doing got a lot of cool things cooking up.
I love that. I love
Good
it.
stuff, man.
And then Lee, I know Lee's got some wild stuff going on, don't you, right now? Didn't you just?
Yeah, a bit busy. Yeah, Battle for Bustle 4 out next week. Got Ring Around the Rosie, which is a story with Rob Lyle, myself, and Ryan Vella in the 3rd issue of ComX Presents Noir, which is a current Kickstarter. Man,
Can be found here.
There you go. You can also find varying things right there. So that's where you can find me, battleforbustle.com, on all the Facebook sites and, under my name and b4b.com, blah, blah, blah. It's I'm always around. I'm always here on a Saturday if you can't find me anyway with old Sizzle and Dustin these days. And keeping busy, mate. Got about 2.5 pages of drawings that I've got to get through by tomorrow morning. So once this is over and done with, then then I'm swiveling my chair that way and putting some David Bowie on and
there you go.
So that's my day.
I love it. I love it. And then Sizzle's over there. He's got his ComX stuff come on Kickstarter right now.
Yep. I'll put it there again.
And
so
what
is the ComX Studio? That'll take you to the latest Kickstarter.
For those that don't know, what is it exactly? Okay.
It's an anthology that collects together stories by both upcoming artists, creators, as well as established creators who are wanting a way to get their stories out there. It's just ComX helping creators get their stories out there the best way we know how, and that's by publishing their stories. We put them into 2 anthologies, a black and white one and a color one for the different stories. And supporting us helps us support them. So
I love it. That's exciting.
And there's been some beautiful stories, mate. People that have, had their first issues, of comics that they've ever published, been part of it as well. And that, little dreams come true for them that they never would have found a way to do it and stuff. So it's been some great stories come out of what Shane's established and done with ComX, man. So it's a well worth supporting venture for Australian indies, and anyone else around the world who wants to jump on, man, contact Shane. The man never sleeps. He's always there, let me tell you. So, yeah.
The man that never sleeps. I just got my pre-orders out for this last project that we put out, which was Babes Gordon Dinosaurs issue 2 just came out, and we smashed numbers with that for pre-orders.
Awesome. And congratulations, bro.
Oh, thanks, man. We almost doubled sales from issue 1 on that one. So really, really excited. And we had 115 more pre-orders than we did for the previous issue, which was super, super cool. Not only that, though, we just put out a preview for If It Hops. I've never written a cop drama before, so I'm really excited about that. And not only is it a cop drama, but it's like an anthropomorphic cop drama. So, mad fun.
Will we expect anything less?
Man, look, it's going to be mad fun. It's going to be mad fun. But we've got the Listener Book 4 comes out in March, so we're really excited about that. And we're moving in. This is the end of the first arc, which is exciting for us because in a year we've put out 4 issues of that book. So we're really, really, really excited to be able to put that out. And then after that, I think we've got in May is going to be the full release if it hops, as well as Greed issue 3. So really stoked about that as well. And we just submitted to previews, so you guys should see us in previews here shortly.
Excellent.
Really
Sweet.
excited.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff.
For sure. And you guys can find me anywhere. You can look up my name, with the exception of TikTok. Other than that, I'm on Discord. I'm on anywhere but TikTok. So,
Right. Once I finish here, I'm making a bootleg Dustin Brunell on TikTok.
Yeah, get on
Now
there.
we're getting somewhere. Lee. Get it done.
Get on
Get it
there.
done.
And TikTok.
You're not there with the kids.
Yeah, get on there and TikTok for me, because I'm not doing it. Andy's supposed to be doing it, but I'm not doing that shenanigans.
I got 2 little nieces, and they were doing a TikTok video, and I'd come up the back, and they went, "Get out of it." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "You're old."
Oh no! No! Don't you know?
Nasty.
Okay.
Brought crashing down.
Well,
Nice.
All right. Well, I guess we better rock and roll. Our time is up. So I'll jump in there and say, Mr. Best, thank you very much for being on the show. Pleasure to meet you and talk to you today. And welcome back anytime. To Andre Daniels, it was a pleasure to meet you, mate. So welcome back anytime you like, and keep up the good work, buddy. And yeah, only forward, my man. It's keep digging it in. To my mate Dustin, you're a champion, and I'll talk to you shortly. And Sizzle, love you, mate. You're a champion. keep that thing going.
I'll do the best I can.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Good Friday night. Be good.
much love, everybody.
See you all.
Be easy.